The college football regular season is already halfway over. It's terrifying, I know, but we're really starting to hit the meat of the season and learning a ton about these teams. And so, something that I thought would be fun to do because we've hit the midway point of the season is to revisit my conference championship game predictions and to update them based on what I now think is going to happen with all that we've learned during the first half of the season. Start with the ACC. Headed into the season, my pick was the Miami Hurricanes winning the ACC title over Florida State in the ACC championship game. Now, funny enough, I took a ton of flack for this pick because of Miami. I was told that Miami is always overrated every year. They're not going to make it happen. They don't have what it takes. It's just not going to happen with Cristobal because he can't do this and that and all that. Meanwhile, Florida State was actually the pick that aged horribly. The Seminoles already have, I think it's 5 losses on the season now, a really disastrous season for the Seminoles. And so for that reason, they're the team that I'm going to be removing. I'm going to stick to my guns and keep Miami there as the winner. I thought Cam Ward could be electric on this team, and their backfield could be really good and push them to a new level, and I think it has. I think they've really showed a lot through the first couple games. I know there's people that still aren't sold in Miami. I'm going to keep them as my pick, and the other team in the championship game, I'm going to go with the Clemson Tigers in my updated pick. Clemson has just been humming as of late, and they're a team that I think can run the table from here and make the ACC title game. I was tempted to just pick Clemson to win the ACC. They could very well be the best ACC team, but I didn't want to get ahead of myself. Clemson hasn't played a team with a real heartbeat since that Georgia game to open the season. Honorable mention, just missed, also considered, whatever you want to call it, SMU, a team with a manageable schedule and only one loss that's in the non-conference. Syracuse, a team with one conference loss, but also an extremely manageable schedule down the stretch. And then Louisville. Louisville only has one conference loss to SMU, and they're a team that I think could factor in. So those are all other schools that I considered, but ultimately, to me, it came down to Miami and Clemson still. For the Big Ten, I was pretty cut and dry. I went with the 2 favorites for my conference title game. Didn't overthink it. Said Ohio State versus Oregon seems like what's going to happen. They have 2 of the best rosters in college football. I think they've both been building to this season, and I think the Buckeyes are going to win the Big Ten. Now, these 2 teams just played each other, so that was a really big key piece to the sample size, and the Ducks beat Ohio State in Eugene. But for my updated pick, I'm going to remain exactly the same. I'm going to say Ohio State beats Oregon in the Big Ten title game. They were neck and neck. Ohio State loses by 1 point on the road. And so theoretically, if they meet again in the Big Ten title game, it'll be at a neutral site. And I think a 1-point loss on the road, neutral site, I know that's not exactly how it translates, but I trust the Buckeyes to rebound and still win the Big Ten. And I'm going to rock with my original pick when I can. And so in this case, I'm going to rock with it. The other teams that I considered here, really only 2. Indiana, because they're still undefeated and because there's a path with their schedule. If the right things break for them, maybe they could make it happen. And then there's Penn State on there. The Nittany Lions host Ohio State. They haven't lost a game either. So those are the 2 other teams I considered. But outside of that, I don't think there's any serious Big Ten contenders that you could consider out of there. Even the Nebraskas and the Illinois of the world, I just do not see them winning the games necessary to be in the Big Ten title game. We carry things over to the Big 12, where in the preseason, my pick was Utah to win the Big 12 over Iowa State in the conference title game. Now, Utah was the perceived favorite to win the Big 12. There was not a ton of pushback with that pick, but it was Iowa State that a lot of people pushed back on, thinking that the Cyclones were a team that couldn't do that. They've never won 10 games in their school's history, and that's likely what it would take for them to even be in that position. A lot of people didn't see the things I saw, which was a team that was marred by a betting scandal in the early season last year, played the most freshman snaps of any team in the country, that brought back essentially everybody, and has a really good staff. And that's what Iowa State is. That's what I saw in them. And ironically, this is the same thing as the ACC, where the perceived safe pick ends up being the mockable one, and the perceived risky pick ends up being the good one. So my updated pick, going to be Kansas State winning the Big 12 over Iowa State. I still trust the Cyclones to make it to the Big 12 title game, but I actually think Kansas State is going to make a backdoor Big 12 title run here. I know they have the 1 loss to BYU, but I've been impressed with some of the games and some of the ways they've responded down the stretch. I think they're improving a lot, and Chris Kleiman's team, I think, is just going to hit their stride at the right time. I know BYU is still undefeated, and I know they're looking really great. They've also had fantastic turnover luck. Even that game against Kansas State, they had some insane bounces that went their way in Provo. They've had a lot of their biggest games at home as well. So I just feel like for the Cougars, there's going to be a few landmines that get them in the season. And then Texas Tech is the other one I considered. The Red Raiders have looked really good, but there were some serious defensive flaws that they showed early in the season. I know it looks like some of those have been remedied, but I just don't know if Texas Tech is consistent enough to be relied upon like this in this context. So Kansas State, a bit of a maybe wild pick to some based on how things currently look, but I really think it'll age well, and the Iowa State pick has aged really well. Utah obviously is the elephant in the room. It's been the Cam Rising injury stuff all over the game. It's the one thing I thought, surely that won't be an issue again. Surely they'll have either the backup quarterback situation figured out or something, and that just has not been the case. That takes us to the SEC, where in the preseason my pick was Georgia to win the SEC. Crazy, I know, over Texas in the SEC title game. I didn't really get any pushback for Georgia, naturally so. Texas, there was a little bit of the buzz this offseason. I know people will pretend like they don't remember it, but there was a little bit of the buzz is Texas isn't ready for the SEC. Texas can't win in the SEC. Yeah, it looks like Texas is ready for the SEC. So let's go to my updated pick. I think Texas is going to win the SEC now based on what I've seen. I think they're the best team in the country. Obviously, they play Georgia and host them this week, so I guess this could be bucked pretty quickly. But that's my new pick. And a bit of a surprise here, too. I'm going to go with LSU, also in the conference championship game here. I have been just too alarmed by the shakiness from Georgia and Alabama. The fact that Bama beats Georgia, turns around, loses to Vandy. Georgia looks shaky versus Mississippi State, looked shaky versus Kentucky. I just think there's too much shakiness with both those teams. And you look at the games they play. Georgia going on the road to Texas this week. Bama going on the road to Tennessee this week. There's a chance both those teams lose this week, and they still have other tests waiting ahead of them as well. So to me, it's too risky for those guys. Looking at their schedule and looking at how they've looked, with LSU, they just passed a huge test versus Ole Miss. Their biggest test is hosting Alabama later in the season. They still have some games, some landmines, just like every team in the SEC. They got to go at A&M. They got to go at Arkansas. They still have to play Oklahoma as well. So there's still landmines for LSU, but I really like how they've come along defensively, and I think that offense has got what it takes to make the kind of plays and win the games that is required to make an SEC title run. Texas A&M, a team I also considered. They only have one loss, and it's not in conference play, and they've looked pretty good as of late. And Tennessee, they've also looked pretty good. The offense recently has definitely sputtered, but Nico's a young guy. There's a possibility where he figures it out against SEC competition and they start to turn things around. So those teams are considered, but LSU, kind of a little bit of a risky pick. I think it's a high-risk, high-reward pick here. So let's get to the group of five. We're going to kind of go rapid fire here, but starting with the American Conference, I thought it would be Memphis beating Tulane in the American Conference title game. Memphis losing that game to Navy, pretty alarming. Their defense looks pretty bad and worse than I thought it might look. But Tulane, my goodness, all my hopes and dreams for this year one Summerall team have come true. They look fantastic. They have two losses close to Kansas State and Oklahoma, both early in the season, and they've been crushing American Conference competition. So I think Tulane is the best team in the American right now. I think they'll win the American Conference title. Army has been a fantastic story. I thought this team could win a ton of games their first year in the American. They're proving that right, and they look even better than I thought they were going to look as well. They're still undefeated. I thought they were going to be maybe an 8 or 9 win team this season. It looks like they could be pushing that number to like 10 or 11 with how they're playing right now. So I think they'll be in the American Conference title game. But like I said, I think Tulane's the best team. Other teams that are also considered Memphis, they're not out of it. Their loss to Navy is aged well because Navy's also undefeated. I think Navy is a threat. Is a threat to Army still, is a threat to a lot of those other teams. They have some tests down the stretch. We'll see how Navy handles them. I just think Army's the better team. I was higher on them in the preseason. Blake Horvath is electric though. And then you've got a team in North Texas. North Texas has looked pretty good. Their defense is really, really bad though, just like Memphis. They've got a big matchup versus Memphis this weekend, but shout out to Eric Morris and what he's done at North Texas. They're also in consideration. We get to the MAC. My preseason pick was Toledo versus NIU, and the MAC is so crazy right now that I'm just going to rock with that. Toledo, I believe, was the second odds-on favorite to win the MAC this season. NIU might have been top 5 or top 4, something like that. Hammock squad getting that win over Notre Dame made that look really good, but then they lost to Buffalo. It's just complete chaos. Also considered literally 5 teams: Bowling Green, Ohio, Eastern Michigan, Buffalo, Miami. It's just all over the place right now in the MAC, and I'm not sure who's going to win, but any of those teams could as far as I'm concerned. So like I said, I didn't move the pick. In the CUSA, Liberty versus Western Kentucky was the preseason pick. Those are the 2 favorites. Those are the 2 odds-on teams. Nothing crazy there. But the updated pick, I think Jacksonville State is going to sneakily make a backdoor CUSA championship run. People are sleeping on them right now, but I look around the conference, I think they're playing better than anyone else. With a 3-3 record, they're completely flying under the radar. Western Kentucky has also looked pretty good. They get the right games at the right time, so I think they'll represent. Also considered Liberty and Sam Houston. As far as I'm concerned, it could be any combination of these 4 teams. These are the 4 best teams in the CUSA right now. With Liberty, it's just been too alarming. All of these close games to New Mexico State, to FIU, they haven't played any of these big 4 yet, and yet they've looked sloppy in several games. If they would have played App State, I think they might have lost to App State. Sam Houston's a team that's been extremely impressive to me, and one of the best stories of the season. They arguably have the best signature win right now of these teams against Texas State. So Sam Houston, a team to keep an eye on in that race as well. In the Mountain West, my preseason pick was Boise State UNLV, and looks like I absolutely nailed it there. Boise State looks like the best team, UNLV looks like the second best, and everybody else just looks like they're pedestrians. Also considered, I put Colorado State. I didn't seriously consider them, but I think if anybody could do it, I think it's Colorado State. But that's it. I honestly don't think any other team could make a Mountain West Conference championship game push unless something crazy happens with one of Boise State or UNLV. We get to the Pac-12 or the Pac-2. I half-jokingly made the prediction for them, Oregon State over Washington State, and it looks like that was wrong. It'll actually probably be Washington State over Oregon State. The Cougs have just had a much better resume. They've looked a lot better, even though the game's in Corvallis. Give me Washington State, which takes us to the grand finale, which is the Sun Belt. In the preseason, I had Texas State taking down App State. They still have divisions, as you remember, so that was the pick there. Updated pick, I still trust Texas State. They lost a game at ASU. They lost on a last-second, come-from-behind field goal from Sam Houston, but Sam Houston's a decent team, and I think Texas State still has a lot of those great skill players. They're starting to get healthy on defense as well, so I think they will still win the Sun Belt over James Madison. Bob Chesney's squad completely surprised me this season. They've looked really excellent, and so I've got them in that conference title game as well. Also considered both the Louisiana schools. Talk about how great of a story ULM has been. Louisiana looks really good. They just beat Wake Forest. Their only loss in the season was a close loss to Tulane. You've got a Georgia Southern team that's undefeated in conference play as I record this video. And then Coastal Carolina, not selling on them completely yet after their loss to James Madison. They still have a shot to come out of their division as well. So that's my updated pick there for the Sun Belt. So that does it. Those are my updated conference championship predictions for every conference in college football. Let me know down in the comments what things you disagree with, what things you agree with, what you would change, and who your updated champions are, maybe who your preseason champions are. Do you have some that aged really well? Do you have some that are aging pretty poorly? I love to hear it all. As usual, if you enjoyed the content, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. We'll have a full Week 8 prediction video out tomorrow. I'm super excited for that. I love recording that every week. And I will see you guys later this week.